Hey everybody, it's JD Oliva from the Fight Game Media Network. I'm here with my buddy Pete Kowalczuk, and we had big breaking news in the state of Illinois yesterday. Jim Heffernan, longtime Illini coach, is out, and from what it sounds like, the job at University of Illinois will open up. And to some people, like, so what? What's the big deal about the University of Illinois job opening up? This is huge news and what it could possibly mean for the future of NCAA wrestling. Pete, you had the idea to talk about this. What do you think about this big turn of events?
I think it's a giant job, right? Big Ten jobs normally don't open up. Jobs at University of Illinois don't open up. They've kind of kept it in-house for a long time. The state of Illinois is great at wrestling, and we really haven't had a big name wrestling coach in a while, right? Heffernan had some success, and everyone, all the people speak super highly of him, but it really hasn't been like this big name hire there. And so as a fan of Illinois wrestling and U of I and wanting to be able to embrace it more, I would love to see a big name and a big splash at U of I and trying to find the best person possible.
So here's why the Illinois job is so important, is that the state of Illinois, traditionally, we don't get the recognition that Pennsylvania or even some of the East Coast states do. But in the international styles, we are incredibly dominant in the high school level, and have been for quite some time. So if you could get all these Illinois kids to stay at home, it could be game changing. Like North Carolina had their first national champ this year in like 2-3 decades. Is Austin O'Connor. That's an Illinois kid, right? We had the top 4 ranked guys, 197 this year, were all kids from Illinois. None of them wrestled for the University of Illinois. So if you could land the right guy, you could, in a few years, theoretically literally compete with Iowa or Penn State.
100% right, for sure. Think about Ragusan, Luan, O'Connor, Cassiope, Warner, Hamidi, Hayden Kopis. All of these guys with the right name would stay in Illinois, or you would like to. What happens at Penn State, primarily, they get whoever they want, but they also get the best Pennsylvania kids to stay, right? Carter Shirachi, we didn't even really know, like, he was a really good kid, but he wasn't, I'm going to win nationals good kid, right? But he stays in Pennsylvania, he goes with Cal, and he gets the job done this year. What we're missing in Illinois is we can't lock down the border. For whatever reason, you can't lock down the border. And there's relationships with high school coaches that haven't been there, and that partly hinders the relationship of the program and building the program. Now they've started to keep some kids in, right? The Braun Nagels, Luke Luffman. It's good. It's great to see. They get a big recruit in Bird to come to Illinois. Mm-hmm. That's great to see. So there is a foundation. There is a core of kids that can really start to be something. But what I want to see and what we need to see in Illinois, and what I'd like to see out of this new AD, is that they go get somebody, go get someone huge, go make a big splash, make it so these kids can't leave. And if they go the route they've been going, which is you hire internally, you keep it copacetic, nothing really changes. We're not going to keep those kids in house.
No, and I agree. I think that Illinois Dylan Duncan had a surprise national tournament, like being an All-American. I had him in my fantasy team. I was proud I called that one out. But otherwise, it was not really a great tournament for the Illini this year. And I kind of understand why this is a good time for Heffernan to kind of move on. It's not a bad thing. And it does sound like they're not going to just give the job to Mike Poeta, who is the head assistant coach there. He is going to have to fight for it a little bit. I like Mike. I think he's a good coach, but I do think competition breeds success. And I would like to see Illinois talk to whoever is interested in the job and really fish it out, because I think they would be surprised at who would come in, and I would hope they would keep the RTC running as is, because I do think Brian Medlin is doing a really good job with that program. We had 2 guys that were really close to making Olympic team this year for a program that's only 3 years old. I mean, that's pretty successful. So it's intriguing. Let's fantasy book this. If you're the AD at Illinois, who are you looking at?
Well, do you want my realistic answer? Or do you want my crazy answer?
We're on a podcast.
My realist, yeah, I have a couple. I have a couple in my brain. So what I would like to see at a U of I head coach, I would like to see a charismatic recruiter.
Yeah.
A hardcore recruiter. And it doesn't necessarily have to have Illinois ties to me. So the first name that comes to my mind is the guy who's been getting everybody, which is Reeder.
Yep.
Reeder's been getting all of these guys, I think, right? I think Bono does a great job at Wisconsin, but John Reeder from Wisconsin in recruiting, you saw him with Amos. He was like Amos's guy. He was with Amos for a full week down in Texas. He recruited Hamidi out of U of I and Hayden Kopis, which I think both of them were probably realistically looking at U of I and Wisconsin at the same time, and they picked Wisconsin, right? So John Reeder is the first name that I could think of. I also think I could see how Poeta could get the job.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Poeta is, one of the best high school wrestlers to come out of Illinois. He was a stud. He's been in U of I's program for a long time.
NCAA finalist.
NCAA finalist, just so happens to be in Jordan Burroughs Olympic champions bracket, right? So that's nothing to be ashamed of, right? And he has been around, and know he loves U of I. He loves U of I. So that's great to see. But I don't know, part of their struggles at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Poeta's around already, right? Nothing against Poeta, but like some of those struggles at the end and not really producing in the national tournament, I think could fall on his shoulders. So I would like them to kind of reach out and see their guys. Another person I think would be an interesting call, and I think Ramos, I think he could do a good job. I think people think he might be too young and he might not be the CEO type person, but he's a good recruiter, right? I mean, like Jamie Hernandez, who didn't wrestle this year in NCAA tournament, he probably went to U of I if North Carolina was an option. Austin O'Connor, right? Those guys are at North Carolina, and North Carolina has a great staff. It's a big name staff. What's that?
Blah Danwee. He was a kid who was between Illinois and North Carolina, and he said himself that he really liked Tony Ramos, and that really helped him seal the deal. Like I can absolutely see that Tony Ramos, Illinois kid, 3-time state champion from Illinois, went to Iowa, won a national title. I could see him coming to Illinois. I think he would be intrigued by coming back home to Illinois. I can absolutely see that being a reality.
Yeah, right. And you just don't want to lose these kids, And I think Blah is a good example because Blah is like, as a state finalist. He's not a project kid, but he's in a way like kid, he needs a little bit of extra seasoning, but you have to have the coaches and the big names that would keep someone like him here. Mm-hmm. And I think we have the talent to compete in the state with anyone, right? I think they could be the big name. They could beat anyone. Another name that I think is interesting, but I think for whatever reason, just because he rose through the wrong way, he's not going to, and maybe he's not interested, is Izzy Martinez.
I don't know this for sure, but this is kind of like why Pat Smith isn't a head coach. I don't know if Izzy finished his degree at Iowa or not, and I don't think. And if I'm wrong, I'll take the L on this one. But one, I don't know if they can, because I'm not sure if he's if he has a degree. Two, I don't know if he'd want to turn down what he's doing at Izzy style right now, because he's kind of doing his own thing, coaching the best kids that we have in the state of Illinois, and making a lot of money coaching guys in the UFC. Like he was just cornering Kennedy Blades last weekend. He's got a tremendous amount of freedom at doing what he does. I don't know if he'd want to lock himself down into a college position. I mean, if he did, he'd be awesome at it. But that would surprise me a little.
Yeah, I just see similarities now. Bourmet and him. I see similarities from the club team to the college level and how they, I think Bourmet is a much more like straight and narrow dude than Izzy is, right? And Izzy,
they're different dudes. Yeah.
He does his own way, mm-hmm. which is good or bad, depending on how you look at it. But I would say that Izzy's a winner. Yes. Right. And he gets kids to wrestle really hard for him, mm-hmm. and they love wrestling for him. Mm-hmm. So that being said, right, like I think it would make sense. But yeah, I don't know either. Like if you have to be a college graduate, be a Division I coach, sure, right? Because obviously education super important in that role. But who knows? I just would like to see them look outside the box a little bit and try to get it right. And JD, I have one. I have one. And I think this is the best answer.
What do you got?
This is the answer that would absolutely lock it down. There's Illinois ties. I think that if this person came to U of I, it would be a blank check, and it should be a blank check. I think he should be the very first phone call from the athletic director if anyone is thinking this way. And I might be the only one willing to say that David Taylor should be the next U of I wrestling coach.
There
And
is a
it should
lot.
be him.
That's interesting. So
It should be him. Now,
David,
here are my reasonings.
yeah.
One, his wife is from Illinois
Yes.
already, right? So there's family ties here. If number two, so there's that, right? There's that family tie. Number two, if he is looking to be a coach at the Division I level, he would like to, I would imagine, go to a place that doesn't have any competition in state. That's U of I.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one competing here for Division I level. Now, obviously, there's Northwestern, but you have to have
different
grades and different looks and different kid,
mm-hmm.
right? Plus, you don't know where he is at in his competing career. If August is it, if he's done after the Olympics, which he very well could be, this crop of guys who've been around for a while, David Taylor included, he could easily be looking to make this move. And I think U of I is a super attractive job because a guy like U of I, a guy like him at U of I, no one leaves. No one leaves. Everyone stays. And like, I don't know exactly what these Division I coaches make. Who knows exactly, right? Maybe 200. I don't know what Heffernan was making, but you can pay David Taylor whatever you feel like to make him be there, and he could build an absolute powerhouse at U of I. And so I see that as a guy who, he's from Utah originally, right? Then moved to Ohio. Now he's at Penn State. And if his athletic career is winding down and he's looking to make a jump, it's the biggest splash they could possibly make. That's why I think it's super far reach. I don't know how realistic it is, but it's something I would absolutely love, and it would light the wrestling world on fire. And that's really the only type of move that would light the wrestling room on fire.
That is really interesting because David Taylor is not from here, but you're right. His wife is, his brother-in-law, I believe, coaches at Northwestern still. Like that is really interesting. Like, if you were to get David Taylor, like let's fantasy book this. Like I said, if you were to get David Taylor as a Division I head coach right out of the gate, your head assistant becomes super important, right? Because you got to have a guy, he's fresh. You got to have a guy who's been in the system a little bit, knows how to do it. Perhaps Jimmy Kennedy is someone that accompanies him. That is very interesting. What's interesting to me the most about it is, for the last 2 generations, we've had like most of college wrestling has come off either the Dan Gable coaching tree or the John Smith coaching tree, right? Like all these coaches have their roots. A lot of them still have their roots that run through Dan Gable in Iowa. He would be the first person to have this would be the first person off the Cale Sanderson coaching tree, right? Because no one has left Penn State to go do their own thing, as I think. Like, they've kept Casey Cunningham there. They've kept Cody Sanderson there. Like, nobody has left Happy Valley, and whatever they're doing is working, right? Like, they get the best kids, but they get them to wrestle, right? And they get them to perform, and they all have a giant smile on their face. So that guy has got something figured out. So could David Taylor take part of that and impart it to a different program? That's really, really fascinating. I never would have thought that.
Yeah, that was just my out of the box, like who would be the biggest name? And I think Casey Cunningham, but I also imagine that core group of Penn State coaches probably want to stick around with Cale.
I think so.
I don't know how old Casey Cunningham is, but he's not a young cat by any means. And maybe like Casey Cunningham would be a fantastic hire, but I just I don't see Casey Cunningham. I don't see Cody Sanderson. I don't see any of that core group of guys that want to make a move, because at this point they feel like Penn State guys. And not that David Taylor isn't. I just feel like he's enough of a trailblazer that he could make this move, and it makes so much sense. Like in my brain, when I'm like, who's the guy? Who is the one guy that if it happens, it would be the biggest move in Division I wrestling? It would have a ripple effect everywhere. And then people are already talking about this U of I job everyone's going to start moving now, because this is going to be a big battle to get this job. And I think and I don't know if U of I has to make that call. So AD, if you're here, I'm looking right at you. If you watch this podcast, if you listen to this YouTube video, please, for the sake of Illinois wrestling, please call David Taylor with the blank checkbook, because it will be the best decision that U of I has ever made in athletic history by far. And it wouldn't even be close.
I like the idea. I wonder if the timing is bad because like he has to have his focus 100% right now on winning an Olympic gold medal. Right? Like that's got to be that's got to be what he's thinking. That's the only thing I could see holding something like that back. Right? But I believe I want to say Coleman Scott continued to compete when he got the North
John
Carolina
Smith
job.
did it.
John Smith did do it. That's true.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard. John Smith did it at Oklahoma State where he was. It's a little bit different, but I mean, like, I mean, that's too intriguing not to at least make a phone call.
Yeah, and that's what like it's a fairy dust. It's pipe dream, right? This is like what is the best answer is David Taylor, and it doesn't. The timing isn't perfect, but the Olympics are this year, right? So even if they're going to have recruiting and stuff like that, David Taylor's recruiting, it's not going to, it wouldn't be this crazy hard battle of this conversation, convincing them to do it. There's a lot to be a Division I head coach that I don't know. I know how hard it is to be a high school head coach, and it's hard, right? Like it's not super easy. It's a hard deal, especially during the pandemic, but the Big Ten jobs don't come along often, right? Penn State's going nowhere. Bormet's going nowhere from Michigan. They'll never leave the Iowa tree in Iowa. Northwestern, those guys are pretty locked down. So like these are the most coveted jobs, except for the Maryland job, right? The most coveted jobs in all of wrestling. So when you look at a team, and I think about it from a coaching perspective, you don't really want a lot of competition. You don't maybe Northwest, right? We said Northwestern, but he could 100% lock on the border and create a powerhouse in a couple years.
Which is what Kale did.
Which is what Kale did, right? And Kale was done, so it made more sense at the time. But it's if David Taylor wants to be a Division I head coach, they could find a way to make it work, because maybe he keeps Jeremy Hunter around. Jeremy Hunter's a Penn State guy, right?
Yeah, I think he is.
So that transition, you call your brother-in-law, which Jimmy would be down here, right? Jimmy already recruits in the state. You keep Jeremy Hunter around for a season or two, and then you make another big splash in your your coaching tree or coaching carousel, right? Whoever's going to be with you, you keep Medlin around, because I think Medlin is a fantastic opportunity for anyone, because kids love him in the state, right? And so it is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But that's I'm trying to think is the one guy that I think it's just crazy enough that it could work. And so there's no other names that would get me as excited as David Taylor. And it's not even, I mean, like who? Maybe Dake, but I don't see Dake. I don't see Dake being a Division I head coach. Burrows, I don't think Burrows.
He's talking about
moving to Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's talking about continuing to compete. I don't know if Burrows has it in him to be a college head coach. He doesn't seem to be interested in that.
And so David hasn't really committed to 2024.
No.
He hasn't been out here saying I'm going after it. Burrow's has already been doing that. Dake hasn't been talking about that stuff, right? So some of these guys who are, and like I said, David Taylor's 30, 31. He's not young. He could do 100%. If he wants to go to 35, 40, he could do it. He's the type of cat that can do it. But I just think that David Taylor to U of I would unleash a power that U of I sports has never made a splash like this that could really shake the tree. And this is the one.
I think Cale Sanderson was 31 when he took over Penn State. So there are some similarities. Cale got that Olympic team a lot earlier than David Taylor did, but they're very, very similar. So if we don't get our pipe dream of David Taylor, I like John Reeder. I think he's become an excellent Division I coach. He's a great recruiter. He's done a fantastic job with Wisconsin right away. You saw Braxton Amos competed in both Olympic trials in Greco and freestyle. He's not really a guy who trains Greco all the time, but he was in the finals. So that's pretty damn impressive.
Right.
So they're doing a really good job out at Wisconsin. I wonder if because you got to look at too is I imagine a lot of the second tier coach, like not second tier, excuse me, like a lot of the mid-major coaches would want to be putting in for that job, because I'm like, people are going to be fighting for this thing. Like you're going to have guys from all over the woodwork. Is this something you see Mark Perry coming back to maybe look into, or is is the blood so bad from when he left the last time? You know,
I don't think the blood's bad, but like, is that, I don't know. Sure.
does it
Cool,
excite
man.
you? I don't know.
No, I no, because Mark Perry wasn't willing to recruit in the state. He only recruited from
That's true.
California, which worked
Hmm.
for two guys, but he didn't recruit in the state. So like you have to lock like you, and that's why I throw out Ramos, because I think Ramos already recruits really well in the state.
Yeah, a lot of
You
kids.
know, so
There's a
right,
pipeline
and
from
like
Illinois. Yeah, already.
they're already doing it, right? Reader already does it. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, maybe an Andrew Howe. I could see Andrew Howe. He's probably going to try. He's
Yeah,
gonna at least try, right? I mean, he has the pedigree to do it. I don't think Andrew Howe just isn't. No, I know Andrew. It's just not as exciting. It's just not as exciting, because I just would like to see a charismatic, go-getter type dude in that position. So I, what I know is going to happen is they're going to hire in house, and like I think that like that's the end of, like I think it's what they're going to end up doing, because they've done it historically as a program, as U of I, as a college. But this new AD has been doing a good job. He got Brett Bielema in there for football. I know he got a really good basketball coach there, turning that program around. So we don't know yet is how serious he is about winning in wrestling. And if he's serious, he's making some of these phone calls, or guys are going to come up and try to get this job, because it's U of I. It's a Big Ten school.
I got to ask, because one thing that I hear from kids and from other coaches about U of I is the facilities are I don't want to say substandard, but they're definitely not with the rest of the conference. They don't match up to the rest of the conference. Is that something that, even if you do get a dynamite guy in, right? If you get like your dream hire, does the facilities at the University of Illinois prevent a lot of those kids from going away? Because Illinois kids do traditionally go away. Our best kids don't go. Even when Illinois was really good under Mark Johnson, they typically went other places. Like, does that change if you get a dynamic hire?
I mean, it depends on the guy. And I think that's what really matters. It just depends on the guy. If it's David Taylor, I think too, that's a commitment to wrestling that the facilities are going to have to change. Like I don't think you don't get a big hire without them committing to the program, because you're going to have to pay them much more than you're going to have to pay other guys. Right. Which I think when Heffernan got the job, I think it's a easy transition. It didn't ruffle any feathers. Wrestlers love him. U of I graduates absolutely love that guy. And I've never heard them say any bad things about him. I just could tell you from like my experience in the state and as a coach and as a wrestler, like it's not an exciting person in that position. And so I think that the right dynamic personality and the right recruiter makes it an elite spot to be at, regardless of facilities. Right. It is tough, because when you look at Minnesota's room and you look at
Penn State's,
Michigan's got its own facility, Ohio State's, Iowa's is ridiculous and the best wrestling arena on the planet.
Right.
There are a lot of things that U of I has to battle, which is why, to me, if they're serious about winning wrestling matches, you have to pay the right guy the right amount of money to get it. And then I don't think it matters, because the right person can change that around. Now, maybe that has some pushback on these elite level coaches, but I think it's still a Big Ten job. So hopefully, there's talks of making a new wrestling room a couple of years ago, and then they built the football facility, right? Because football, it's football. But I think if it's the right guy who can push the AD a little bit to open up that checkbook, I think that these types of problems will be solved relatively quickly, and we can get there. But it is an issue because, Huff Hall, I like Huff Hall just because I've been there over and over and over again.
It's special to us.
I like Huff Hall.
Yeah. It's special to us, right? Because we grew up in the system, and we know, Huff Halls where the Illini go, and Assembly Hall where the state turn, that stuff is special. But I mean, like when you're, like you said, when you're throwing kids up against like this other stuff, these other amazing facilities, it's tough. I keep going back to the more I think about the Israel Martinez thing, I do think that's intriguing, because that is a very out of the box, and that would be a dynamic hire. If that is a possible hire, that is something Illinois should consider, because that guy he's a phenomenal recruiter. He does have the inside track on just about every single kid in the state. That is interesting if it is possible. Like I said, I don't know if Izzy would want it or if it's possible, but I mean, that is another thing I think they should at least kick the tires on and see if it's a possibility. right?
Yeah, and
Because
there's some limitations. There's some limitations there, right? If you have to be a college graduate and stuff like that, and then it doesn't work, right?
No,
Then
no, but at
it
least
just
you checked
doesn't.
in. Yeah, at least
And
you
if he
did.
doesn't want, maybe he doesn't want it,
That's possible.
which would make sense too. I mean, it's the same thing. Like David Taylor probably doesn't. I don't really know. Like David,
Right.
it's just it just David Taylor makes my heart skip a beat. You know what I mean? It just makes me go like, ooh, that's a nice one. That's one. It would light the rest of the world on fire.
It
And
would.
so it just really intrigues me.
It would. The timing is the only thing I scratch my head on. With it being an Olympic year, like if the pandemic doesn't happen and this all goes and David Taylor finished out of 2020, I think, oh man, maybe this is perfect. The timing is the only thing that I'm kind of like, I just don't know. I just don't know if it happens right now. Because if he's interviewing for jobs when like he's supposed to be like really focused on winning a goal, I just don't know. I don't know how realistic that is at the moment. I'm curious. Are there any other like Division One, like mega power Division One assistants that you could see that would be big splashes? You said Reader's a really good one. Is there anyone else that strikes and you go, yeah, that's something that could be?
I mean, Travell, maybe.
Like enough, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, he just took that. Oh, Snyder too.
Is Brian Snyder
Brian
leave?
Snyder.
He's been in Nebraska for so long, like, and he's never seemed to want. He was at Harvard for a hiccup, and then was back at Nebraska. Like, is he a guy who wants to be a Division I head coach? Because it seems like a lot of these top level assistants are very happy being top level assistants and not being the CEO type. So I mean, like, but you want to talk about the guys responsible for the success of Jordan Burroughs. Brian Snyder's number one, right?
And a dynamic recruiter who recruits well out of Illinois, right?
Yes.
So I think this is where the dilemma is because where do guys feel comfortable? John Reeder might be Bono's number 2 until Bono is John Reeder's number 2. And those two seem inseparable, but I think guys who are super competitive and are an elite level human, I think that the idea is just out there to go find a job, to be the guy, and you see what you can do and see if it's right or wrong, right? I mean, and so I think but like there aren't many. I don't see many other big splashes, right? Brian Snyder makes sense. I mean, Sharella, right, from Michigan could make sense. He seems like a Michigan guy.
Yeah.
So like just the way Snyder seems like a Nebraska guy, just like Morningstar makes sense to me. He seems like an Iowa guy. So there are guys who are out there that I could see do it, but like when you're in your system, it's really hard to break away. It's hard to go break away and do your own thing. But and even the mid majors, I don't know who from the mid majors who's the from the mid majors is interests you. Is there someone in the MAC?
In the MAC, Brian Smith, but I don't see him leaving Missouri, right?
Yeah,
because Missouri's in the MAC, but I mean they're in this weird spot. Are they a mid major? Are they not a mid major? Like it's awkward. But that's your top MAC school every year is Missouri. Is another. What about someone at Oklahoma? What about like a Zach Esposito? Oklahoma State does a really good job turning out head coaches. Right? Yeah. They don't typically recruit Illinois unless there's like a dynamic single recruit in Illinois. But I've seen a lot of really good coaches come off John Smith's tree. Neil Ersman's doing a really good job at getting Little Rock started. Right. And Bryce Hossman, a friend of ours, came out of the Oklahoma State coaching tree specifically. Mm-hmm. So like that interests me because we've seen like Mark Branch, we've seen a lot of good coaches come out of that system. So is it a Zach Esposito, maybe, if he's interested? That's something that I think could be intriguing.
That one's intriguing for sure. That one's super interesting. I don't know if it's I don't see the fit. And that's what's that's what's hard for me is some of those names I just don't see the fit. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to interview it for it. It doesn't mean they're not going to do a good job, but I would like to see some type of.
Kale was a weird fit at Penn State too, because Kale he's Kale, right? Exactly.
But he's Kale, right? Yeah. And that's the thing is like, he's a good fit anywhere.
True.
And that's why David, I'm going to keep going back to it because I think it's the only one that's crazy enough that might just work because he doesn't make any sense. And that's why it's perfect because it's who he is. So these guys who are coming from other regions of the country, it's going to be really tough to make a good move here because you have to understand kind of the dynamic. And
Illinois is weird. Yeah.
Illinois is weird too, because we don't wrestle folks down in the off season like these other states do. We're freestyle and Greco, and you have to be of that mindset. Now imagine if David Taylor was running like Fargo camp for Illinois.
Oh my
Do you know what we do? The teams are ready. You know what I'm saying? Like, what if that was a real thing? And so, like, it's a giant pipe dream. But from the mid majors, I don't really see Missouri. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think
no
Brad
reason
Smith's
for him to leave.
Yeah.
There's no reason for him to leave. When you look at, I mean, the Little Rock guy, though, I think that could be. I think he could try. I mean, if he's trying to make a splash, he seems like a go-getter, right?
He built that job. He
made them build a facility for him. When you get that type of dude who's willing to be like, I'm building a program in a state that doesn't have wrestling, they can do great things here.
I've met him a couple times, and he does have that go-getter, like super motivated to do something. I don't know if it's, like I said, like it'd be weird to get Little Rock to just build you this multi-million-dollar facility and then peace out after the first 2 years of competition. Like, I don't know, but I mean, I could absolutely see a guy like that in being intrigued for the job, because that's a good recruiter and he's someone that is inquired a bit. Kerry Colat is a guy I would have said something big. What about Kerry Colat? But he seemed like he just got into Navy. So I mean, like, are you one and done in the Naval Academy? That's a tough place, though. That's a different place. That's a completely different world, jumping from Campbell to Navy. So that's interesting.
And the hardest part is that with the coaches is this is big. It's big time money now, right? In big time Big Ten wrestling. Yeah, right. It has to be. I mean, I don't know how much U of I, it's got to be $200K, right? Maybe for the right guy. I have no, like, it's all super quiet. It's not like football where we know all these things. So I would like to, I think that'd be I think Colat's super interesting, but yeah, I don't see him leaving Naval Academy yet. I mean, but the guy, Neil, from Little Rock, I mean, sure, they had him build a facility, but if these coaches are going to make the moves, right? If you look at the way other sports work, they go to these smaller schools and they go to big schools. They go to smaller schools, they go to big schools. And there's a lot more movement in football.
Yes.
Guys are more willing to jump and go to the next school, right? And build a program and blah, 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 blah. But in wrestling, it doesn't happen. Guys stay still.
Not at the especially mid-major assistants, they bounce around a lot. I've always told kids, don't commit to a school because you like the coach, because there's no obligation to that coach to stay there. Right. So pick schools for other reasons. Because this happens. Assistant coaches go places, right? Coaches leave. It happens. Doug Schwab's done a great job in Northern Iowa. I don't know if he'd want to leave Northern Iowa. He seems to have a really good thing going there. But that's a splashy move.
Yeah, someone actually mentioned that to me earlier, and I think that's an interesting call. I think that Schwab's an interesting call, but I think he's born and bred in Iowa. He went to Iowa and now he's at Northern Iowa, but Central Illinois isn't that far from Iowa. Central Illinois, say that it's an Iowa. It's Iowa Junior. It's not much different down
Central
there.
Illinois is Iowa. Yeah.
So I mean, people who like the outdoors and hunting and fishing and all this stuff, you really enjoy yourself in Central Illinois. You can get yourself a farm and have land and do all those things. So that makes sense to me.
There's a lot of
in my brain.
We got
Brett Metcalf.
Oh, now you're talking. Very much like David Taylor, you're talking about a guy who was a perennial force on the world team for a number of years. He's pulled back. He left the Iowa coaching system to do his own, to go to Iowa State, and has done a pretty good job at Iowa State as an assistant. That is one that I could see being a reality, because he has recruited out of Illinois, and he does seem like that type of guy, and that would be a big splashy hire.
I can't believe it took us 35 minutes to get to
that kidding.
Name. I mean, seriously, I haven't thought about that name yet. I've been thinking about this for 4 days or yesterday. I don't know, or it was yesterday. It feels like 4 days, but I've been thinking about all the different guys, and it took me to Brett Metcalf is a very interesting hire.
Brett Metcalf is, I think he's done look no further than David Carr at the NCAA. Now, granted, he's a Carr. He's got NCAA titles in his blood, but you got to get the job done, and you got to have like elite level coaching to get you there. And Brett Metcalf seems to be, like, for as high strung as he always seemed as a competitor, he seems much looser as a coach, right? Like
Mhm.
he seems like a guy. Like I always figured he'd be more like a Terry Brands type, where he struck me way more as a Kale Sanderson type. You know, like I don't see him being like that Looney Tune in the corner that we've seen. Like he seems like he's got his composure. So that is an intriguing call for me. Like I like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is very interesting, and he doesn't like. You have ties in Iowa, but he's from Michigan. I mean, there's a lot of like those type of dudes who are not gun for hire, but a little bit, right? Where you're a stud in the state, and like
You're
he
willing
has
to
roots in
travel.
Iowa. What's that?
You're willing to travel. You're willing to
Yeah,
go somewhere. You're not locked into one spot. Because a lot like well, even Tom Brands was at Virginia Tech for a few years, right? Like
right.
if you want to be a head coach, you're gonna go put yourself in that position. Terry Brands, man, I think when I was in college, Terry Brands coached at like 3 or 4 different colleges. Like he did some NAIA coaching for a little while. So I mean, guys will bounce around a little bit. Like Kale was the interesting one. Utah guy, Iowa State wrestler, then coaches at Penn State. Like that at the time was like, whoa, mind blowing. And then the turnaround was like overnight with them. So I think this could be because I mean, if the AD, because this AD does seem to want to win, right?
Yes,
So,
yes.
and
Which
if you have to have wrestling in the Big Ten, which you do, you have to have a wrestling program if you're in the Big Ten. So why not? Why not at least kick the tires on some of these guys and try to see what the interest is? And if you do hire Mike Poeta, fine. Mike Poeta's a good coach. Like there's nothing wrong with it. I just want them to, like when my alma mater changed coaches, they didn't do a search. They just moved the next guy up, and I thought they did themselves a disservice. Ryan's done a good job at NIU. Congrats to them. But I think you do your college a disservice if you don't look. Like if you don't see who's interested, right? You never know
yeah,
what can happen. Right. And if you
for,
find out
for sure.
if the right guy is there, no problem, hire him. The ship stays on. But in my mind, there's nothing wrong with, getting a little competitive. Right. Isn't that what we are? Isn't that what we preach? Going out there and be competitive.
100%. And I'd love to see what this new AD is about. Because I think this hire is going to tell. It's going to tell the state like what you think about wrestling. To be honest, if I don't hear that there's a bunch of big names interviewing for this job, or you're not taking these big interviews, then you're not really about wrestling, and then you aren't going to convince high school wrestling coaches that they have to send their kids there, right? Because high school, we have a lot of influence on our kids about where you should go, who you should be with, what do we think is great, right? And what we would like to see is interesting big name, and not even big names, but just dynamic personalities that are their kids are gonna be taken care of. And I would like, I don't know, it's a tough find. I think it's hopefully the search takes a little bit of time. I think, if Stanford is really done, Burrelli's an interesting call.
I wondered about that, and I was going to bring up Stanford in a minute. And when we talk about ADs that want to win, I'll tell you an AD who doesn't want to win is Bernard Muir. Like yesterday night, they announced that they will talk, that the president of Stanford will talk to I think it's the group of 36, the board trying to get Stanford to keep all of the programs that it's trying to axe. And I've got some sources in California that are they're worried that it's a little bit of they're just doing it just to kind of stop the groundswell. And I was speaking to my source, and I told him, I said, well, that's not going to work. They're just trying to take a meeting just to placate. They have no idea how annoying amateur wrestling people can be.
No, I know. Yeah, there's no chance. Like, there's no way we're going anywhere, right? If you just looked at what George Mason did yesterday, they raised $125,000.
Frank Beasley is a heck of a mid-major coach. We talk about good mid-major coaches. Frank Beasley is a hustler. That dude is busting his ass at a place like George Mason that I never even heard of before Frank got the job there. So that is a guy who's really kicking butt on that level. Congrats to you, sir. He did it in a day. That's crazy.
Insane. So I think what these athletic directors have to start to realize about wrestling is, like in George Mason's case, you cannot turn down the guy. You can't close a program that just raised $125,000 in 1 year or 1 day, right?
One day.
1 day. And I looked at the donors list. They had the most amount of donors by like 120. It wasn't even a competition with the rest of the sports. So it makes a lot of sense to save these programs because there is support. And now the problem is with amateur wrestling fans is that I watch wrestling on TV, right? And that's on me too, because I don't go to a lot of dual meets, and we need to be showing up for these programs.
I agree. I agree. It's not, I mean, like where we live in the Chicagoland area, it's not super convenient to get to college dual meets. We have Northwestern, but even that's located in a corner of the state that's kind of difficult to get to off the highway. But you're not wrong. Like we need to get out there. Like I try to make it to the Midlands every year to go watch.
Mhm.
Like we have to, as amateur wrestling fans, you have to get there. You have to support these programs. You know, U of I is 3 hours from where I live, but I mean, we should be more supportive of them. I agree spot on 100% with you on that. Stanford has 12 million dollars in donors right now.
12.5.
That is not an issue. That is not an issue with
No,
Stanford. Stanford has got it.
They're full of a poop emoji, man. It's a
Yes.
joke. It's an absolute joke what they're doing out there. And on top of it, they just had an NCAA national champ. And the difference between the women's basketball team and the reception they got and what Shane Griffith got, and I understand, right? Team, big TV stuff, whatever. It doesn't really matter.
Hey Pete, what's the third most watched college sport on television? I'm just what is statistically, what is the number 3 sport?
It's wrestling.
Absolutely. People don't realize that.
It's wrestling. It's wrestling. And I bet we're one of the most vocal. Obviously, we don't have the numbers that football does, but like the wrestling Twitter community is awesome. It's so much fun to be out there. And that type of groundswell is what's going on at Stanford. So like even they're just tone deaf, right? They just don't understand what's going on because they went out and they tweeted about unbelievable adversity that the women's this has nothing to do with the women's basketball team, but like you tweet out these things about how much adversity they had to go because they had to go play in another nice cush arena while they had the wrestling team wrestling in the dark. And they don't put that out there.
They practiced outside until December. That is unheard of in the sport of wrestling, where they roll the mats up every day outdoors. That doesn't happen in our sports.
It's not even just a sport. It's like, it's just disgraceful and disrespectful towards the athletes. Even if this is the last year, Old Dominion shut the doors and then they sold the mats the next day.
That's disgusting.
You're a joke. These ADs are a joke, and you're trying to find convenient ways to shut down programs that don't deserve to be shut down. You have national champions. You have All-Americans. You have Ryan Mango making the Olympic finals. What is it about? Plus, the high return rate of minority student athletes that graduate from that university is the highest percentage out of any program they have there. All the other programs are, it's just there's no minority base in it. Right. So you give an opportunity to these kids who need an opportunity, elite level school where they have elite wrestling, right? Because the Ivy League, other than Cornell, you can't really have a super competitive atmosphere for Princeton. Sure, correct. And, but like, there's only a handful of schools for those exceptional students, right? That next tier of the achiever. And Stanford is that move. And so in the state of California in wrestling is insane. The whole West Coast about how there's no Division I teams right now. They're all disappearing.
Yes.
Right. And it's just a crazy thing to see.
Fresno's gone. Fresno got kind of sucked up into the Stanford conversation. Fresno's also dropped this year, which is sad because they just came back. They've only been back for 3 years. And then now all we have left as far as Division I programs in the state of California, you have Bakersfield and Cal Poly.
It's crazy.
That's it.
It's crazy. And like,
State
Oregon
of California.
State, the state of California, right? You were talking about West Coast wrestling. There's no Boise State. There's no Oregon. Oregon State's there. Oregon State, the closest drive, it's 6-hour drive to the next Division I wrestling program.
It's insane.
I mean, it's in the hardest part is like, that's not a stable financial situation because they have to spend so much money going to compete.
There's nowhere in the state of Washington. The state of Washington, as we've seen, is super competitive in off-season wrestling. Washington State, they don't support wrestling, right? The West Coast is in such dire straits right now, and it's terrible.
I just hate to see it, man.
I
just hate
awful.
to see it. And I think like from what I know from the Stanford program and the coaches and the human beings that have been around it, right, with Ray Blake and Nate Engel and personally knowing Gabe Townsell and his family, and like there's so much that program, that school could give to wrestling, and we just want to be accepted by them. That's all we want, because all they do, like, imagine like the university allowed them, because they cut the program, to wrestle in black singlets And then they didn't even acknowledge their national champion as a arena on ESPN is chanting, keep Stanford wrestling, keep Stanford wrestling. And they should keep Stanford wrestling. And the fact that it's not, it's still up for discussion is a crazy thing.
The shame about that is if this wasn't a COVID year, right? If this was a normal year and this was happening, do you know how loud that arena would have been? If you had 15,000 people in that place, it would have shook that those, because that chant would have spread like wildfire, man.
It would have sounded like WrestleMania. It would have sounded like WrestleMania. And amateur wrestling fans don't chant like WWE fans, pro wrestling fans. We don't even know how to do it. So the fact that someone was smart enough to figure that out, to keep them and hope they have to hear this message. And it sucks because you see fencing got cut, rowing got cut. There's a bunch of other sports that are affected by this.
It's all their Olympic sports.
It's not just wrestling, but unfortunately for Stanford University is that we don't know how to shut up. I can't stop talking. I can't stop my thumbs for tweeting. I will not stop. I will call them clowns, right? Because that's what they are. They're a bunch of clowns. You are an elite level university with a $30 billion endowment, with a $12.5 million endowment for wrestling alone, and you have to cut your program that costs you under $200K to have a year.
It doesn't make any sense. The International Olympic Committee got tired of listening to us after 6 months. Do you think we're going to stop this with Stanford? Like, this is Stanford University. This is a school with a $50 billion endowment, right?
Yeah,
this is ridiculous. Like, we're not talking about a mid-major. Like, if my alma mater, Northern Illinois, tomorrow said we're cutting the program, we're not the same they are, but I mean, like, the rabble rousing is going to come up, and it's going to be a fight to find money, right? Not at Stanford. Like, we're talking Stanford.
There's plenty of money. There's plenty of money, and there's no reason for this to even be a conversation that's still going on.
I hope that, and I do hope that when this is talking to some people, this meeting is going to happen on Tuesday. And I do hope the president and whoever else is involved in this isn't just, doing it just to shut up some people, thinking that if you take a meeting that it's going to go away. It's going to get louder. It's going to get worse. And like, I think Jason Burrelli is a guy that I think would be an interesting hire at U of I, because he has been a good head coach at Stanford. He's developed All-Americans, developed national champions, he's done a good job. I don't want him there because I want him at Stanford. I want him leading this fight, right? 100%. We need that. Like, that's what we need. We need Jason.
Selfishly, I want Ray Blake in Chicagoland just so I could hang out with him because he's such an awesome dude. But he needs to stay in California. Yeah. He needs to stay in California because that's where they belong. And that's what we want to see. We want to keep Stanford wrestling. We want to keep that message going. And we don't know how to shut up. And it does suck that, the other programs are, like under, it's not as big of a groundswell for those programs. Right. But we've galvanized around Stanford because we want to see it. And I want to be able to, we want to be able to send kids to this great university. And those kids deserve that opportunity.
I interviewed David Shaw, the football coach, back in 2014. Ray hooked it up for me. And so I spent a couple days on the campus of Stanford University, and I was just in awe at what an unbelievable facility is and what an unbelievable place would be. And I was a little taken aback. I was like, man, what an unreal place to go to school. Like, this is an opportunity that should be afforded to. What I love about what Stanford has done is that they give great opportunity to smart kids that are good wrestlers that can't afford it. A lot of the kids that are at Stanford are not like legacy kids, right? They're kids that need the help. A lot of them, like, they need the opportunity, like a Real Woods. Like, that's kid from Albuquerque who went to Illinois to get a career or to get a high school education that sprungboard him into Stanford, right? That's like, these are the great stories. Shane Griffith, same thing, like guy from Jersey who finds the right place to go. Like, they've done such a great job, and they don't, even before all this, they only had a handful of scholarships. They aren't fully funded at 9.9 full scholarships. They have done nothing but succeed with what they've had to work with. And it's, I tip my cap to Jason and Ray and what Alex Terpelli and what those guys have done year in and year out over the last decade. Like, and
Kerry Collett's out there too, right?
Yep.
So, Kerry McCoy.
Kerry McCoy,
not Kerry Collett.
Yeah, I know you meant.
So, it's really sad to see. You don't want to see any programs die, right?
No.
I want to see programs thrive. And it's nice to hear, Chael Sonnen's out here saying that Oregon built a wrestling room, that Phil Knight gave them a certain amount of money, and you have to build the wrestling with that money, with the idea that maybe it'll come back. And probably because Phil Knight head of Nike, knows that there's money in wrestling. Kids love Nike wrestling shoes. People love this sport, and we're not ready to go away.
Here's what's crazy is I don't think people realize how insane we are, and how much if we get loyal to something, we will throw our money at it. Right? Wrestling
For
people like they will spend money if they feel like they have to, and if they believe in the cause well enough. Because we've seen it. We've seen, like, Frank Beasley's the best example of it. 120 grand in a day fundraising. Right? Wrestling people are nuts. We will fund these things. Like, I've seen dads do crazy things to get their kids spots. Like, this is something that we will support. Like if you're a college wrestling coach and you don't have support from a community, that's because you're not out there trying. It's that simple. All you have to do is get a Twitter account and start rabble rousing, and people will be there to back you up. And I've seen it time after time. They couldn't cut Cleveland State. They couldn't cut Southern Illinois. They couldn't cut a lot of these places because people wouldn't show up.
Arizona State.
Arizona State is a great example.
Mm-hmm. Like, you can see what they did at Stanford. The social media presence has been so smart because they're from Stanford, right?
Exactly.
Like, we joke with Ray, who's coached with us at U of I, and like, he's the smartest coach in the room always. Yes. And he doesn't show it because he's super humble, and you can never tell. But they just posted a video of To the Man in Black with all their kids wrestling the national tournament in black singlets while the coaches wore black on black suits. It's just, it's incredible. The messaging's incredible. And it's dynamic what they've done. I'm really proud of the wrestling community, the way we've supported Keep Stanford Wrestling. And I just want to see it go. Like, Stanford, we want to be part. Let us be part. And the wrestling community will keep supporting Stanford and their wrestling program. But, if this actually goes through, it's not a good look, especially because, like, Stanford right now, the last thing your program is known for, the last couple of things, is cutting all these sports and a sailing scandal because you were funneling money in because you wanted these elite level, or these rich kids wanted to get in.
And even elite level, nothing.
You have a program that's full of minority students that wants to be successful and want to do well, that are only making your university do great things, and that you don't want to support.
Isn't it crazy that an AD who's under scrutiny decides to make things worse and to shine a bigger spotlight on what he's doing? Like, this guy might be one of the worst athletic directors in the country. And I forget who was tweeting. I think it might have been 36 Sports was tweeting out the amount of spending that the athletic department has done since he took over. Like, it's insane.
every these college athletic departments are so bloated with money, and they have all these different athletic directors. They have the number one guy, and there's a bunch of people that work underneath him, and everyone gets this crazy salary, right? But college athletics, it really shows, the money shows there isn't a lot of money being brought in. There's just a lot of money going out.
Yes.
So if no sport is really bringing a lot of money in, if you have a sport that's self-funded, because Stanford is now self-funded for the next 10 years, they said. I don't know exactly what that number is, but 6 years, let's just say, if it costs $2 million to run the program, which it doesn't.
Pete, they funded the wrestling team and have enough to start a women's wrestling team at Stanford. That's what they did. They created their own they solved their own Title IX issue. They said, here, we're funded, and now we fundraise enough money so you can start a women's wrestling program, which is where Division I wrestling is headed. Like, women's wrestling at Division I level is going to be a thing within the next 5 to 10 years. It's gonna, maybe even sooner. It's gonna happen.
Yep. No, it's gonna happen. That's why Stanford, why don't you want to be part of that movement? Why don't you want to be a leader in evolution and bringing in women into the Division I level? Because guess who's going to do it? Iowa's going to do it. Oklahoma State's going to do it. The heavy hitters. Kale hasn't talked about it yet, but it's going to happen. right? As soon as they do it, the other big schools, the other big wrestling schools, they're going to have to do
The
it.
floodgates are about to burst open.
Yes.
I wrote about this recently for the site. Women's wrestling is on the verge. It's been it's been one of the fastest growing sports in the last decade. This women's wrestling, girls wrestling, however you want to phrase it. It is going, when they sanction it, one, in our state, and then two, at the Division I level, the floodgates are going to open. More money is going to pour in. We're going to do nothing but produce better athletes. We might have the best women's freestyle program in the country, in the planet right now, and that's just going to get better. Get on board.
It's just going to get better. And Stanford, like, what a way to come back then say, oh yeah, not only are we saving the wrestling program, we're also starting a Division I women's program next year.
That's the perfect way to go. That's the perfect way to go. Speaking of perfect way to go, the best way for you to go is to check out Fight Game Media on Twitter and our website. The Fight Game Media group is awesome. Our Facebook group is really good. Our Patreon network is fantastic. We'll have different shows for anything of pro wrestling you want. Subscribe to this channel and keep watching what we got coming. Pete and I are going to do a lot more stuff with amateur wrestling coming up because, quite frankly, we both like to talk and love our sport. So that's all we got today. I'm JD. Thanks for joining us.
Pete Kowalczuk, see you.